This is the final game in the 5 games match. Uh, this game is going to follow pretty much what happened in the first game in terms of the opening. And so we covered that before. Now he still plays the same moves. I play the same idea of weakening his dark squares. He does the same. And now he plays d4. In the first game, he had played knight to g3. And after knight g3, bishop back, the pawn got pushed and eventually dislodged the knight from here. So he goes for a different idea this time. d4, e6, c3, just strengthening the center with c3, bishop on d6, bishop g5, h6, and so now the bishop is sent towards the king side. It will no longer be available here and there for defensive purposes, particularly this square is weak, but he can still do the job from here. And there's also a possibility that he will play bishop here to challenge my good bishop. And it's my good bishop because it's got my pawn structure is on white mostly, and the bishop is on the opposite color as the pawn structure. So that's why we call that a good bishop. Bishop back, he opposes, so I get rid of my bad bishop. He takes, and now just quite move which can lead to some tactics. For example, should he decide to challenge here, and after bishop capture, the knight recaptures, I simply have knight takes here, exploiting the pin, and if he checks, I just play the knight back. So you got to be on the lookout for things like that. Knight d2, so an attack on the queen side. I am yet to give my address here, so the king hasn't committed to castling on the king side yet, so he's still in the center. Continue the attack, defends the b5 pawn, which was under attack by the queen. And now he takes, taking the advantage, the opportunity to double my pawns. However, it opens up some lines towards his king. So that's more than enough compensation for the doubled pawns. He gets a good outpost with his knight. The rook swings the other way. And now he blocks off my bishop with the f4 pawn, but he may also be threatening to push here. So I decided to just stop that. Of course, he makes this square weak, which can be stopped with the pawn here, but in turn he will make that pawn weak. So it's a difficult balancing game, especially with my king here. But my assessment is that his king is more trouble than mine. Rook up as well. He plays h3, which is probably not the best move. You'd like to play something else. What is the computer gives this, but h3 is just weakening. The rook drops back here, and now he plays king f2, which is understandable. He may want to put some rook behind the pawn to defend or something like that. But really what he had to do is to oppose one of the rooks on the file there. It's not a good idea to leave, two rooks ganging up on the pawn there. Eventually played g3, h5, stopping any possibility later on of playing g4. h4, so he blocks off the king side, but he leaves a very weak square on d4, on g4, and a backwards pawn on g3. But it's still the move that is recommended by the computer as best. Presumably the tactical threat of h4 has to be met, so that's how he does it. But now it's going to be on the defensive for quite some time. Queen here, rook here, threatening the f5 pawn here, because the pawn here is pinned. The king moves away. Unfortunately, in this game, I had wanted to move my king to the king side, but I couldn't, because every time there was a possibility of escape, there's a fork. Say if the king is here, there's a fork that wins the queen, and no matter where the queen is, the queen has to be on b8 or b6 for the time being to protect the pawn on b5. Rook g1, defending. Now I prepared an interesting plan, which is to actually recycle the knight onto c4 or e4. King up, knight back. Now this move is a mistake, because it enables me to achieve my positional plan of transferring that knight forward with the gain of tempo. So here I just play bishop here, threatening to take on h4 because of the rook will be lost, and now he's got to make a move like this. That gives me a chance to come forward. So now the threat of this or that are quite significant, and the computer rightly assesses this position as being the equivalent of 2 pawns down for just slightly over 2 pawns down for in favor of black. Queen back, knight here. So now because the rook is attacked, then that pawn is going to be lost. So that's a significant advantage. Supported pass pawn on a4. It's actually very difficult to pass it, but it can stay there and act as a threat. King drops back, so he's confined. It doesn't have a lot of play. It's very difficult for him to do any kind of maneuvering like this or that, because he would lose that pawn, so that means he would have to somehow defend here, but he can't defend because of bishop takes here. So there are threats that keeps him tied up. I'm resisting taking this piece because I have other plans for it. But here I make a mistake that contradicts the plan I had. The plan was to come on d6, and he can play whatever he likes. Knight e4, knight takes, pawn takes, rook moves, f5. Clearly winning. Still has to be won, but it's a great game. I mean, there's little he can do. He cannot. He can never maneuver his knight to come to one of these squares, or here. He would have to go through the back door. But you find out that when the knight is here, he doesn't do much. And in the meantime, as soon as the knight is played here, you can take the pawn on h4 because it's pinned. and there's always the possibility that the king is going to move there, and the queen is going to come here onto h4, and eventually the king is going to come here should the queen attack the b5 pawn, say from f1. So it's not looking good for him. So back to the I played this is just a bad move, but he's still winning. The computer gives this as a 3.8 pawns ahead. Rook to f3, king e7, queen here. Now, interestingly, what's going to happen in this game is it's going to be a game of maneuvering until he loses on time, because black has the position, it has the play, it has all the latent tactical threats. But I think it's Nimzovich who used to say a threat is more important than its execution. So the threat is making your opponent think at every move. Can he take on g3? Can he sacrifice on f4? Can he push the pawn on the a file, and so on? And while your opponent is doing this, he's burning time. So he goes back there to get into e5, which would be a good move. I'm actually not interested to stop it. I just continue with my plan. Take this, keep maneuvering. Remember, at each move, he has to think. I barely spend any time thinking here. Now I pin him, he unpins, I go there, he goes here, rook up. The rook up was threatening to take on h4. It's just little series of threats like that makes it very, very difficult for him. So he goes back defending the pawn, which means he's got to pin himself. Just go up. So now the king has come in defense of the h5 pawn. The closed nature of the position makes it difficult for black to win, but the position is definitely better. And here, after queen a7, he lost some time. The suggestion is king here is going to start maneuvering his king around the other side, and so as to unpin from this. The computer gives f6 as the best move. I'm having trouble and thinking that opening lines is going to help. So you would need to recapture this. The king moves to here. Then should you take now or not? Now you need to defend. This pawn is on, so you need to first defend, and then you'll take the pawn. He's going to play spoil by pushing. Rook f8, queen e2. It's just a tough grind. The rook. See, at the moment we're not threatening to push there because that pawn is not going to get anywhere. So you will need. See, the computer is out of ideas. He's thinking about playing rook g to where here, and God knows why. Suggesting that this is the best move. And you play here, and he's trying to wiggle into opening lines here, but I'm not convinced that it's a good idea. Although pawn push here would result, if he took, would result in knight taking and the knight coming here. But as soon as the position opens up in this game, I think White is going to have as much chance of getting in and drawing as Black has to win the game. So here you have a game of manoeuvring that resulted in the loss on time by White, which is just as good as a checkmate, actually.